When John moved into the Maple Ridge neighborhood, he thought he'd finally found the calm he'd been missing. After 20 long years on the police force, he'd just been promoted to police chief, and he wanted nothing more than to enjoy quiet evenings with his golden retriever, Buddy. Buddy was a gentle soul, the kind of dog who'd greet mailmen with a wagging tail and never bark unless there was a reason. But that peace didn't last long. One crisp morning, as John mowed his lawn, he noticed his new neighbor standing by the fence, arms crossed, expression cold. Her name was Karen Dillard, and she looked like she'd been waiting her whole life to complain about something. "Excuse me," she said, waving her hand like she was summoning him. "Your dog barked this morning for 6 minutes. That's a violation of community noise standards." John stopped the mower and blinked. "Community noise standards?" "Yes." "The HOA requires," he interrupted calmly. "Ma'am, there's no HOA here. I checked before I bought the property." Her jaw tightened. "Well, there should be. Some of us care about our neighborhood's image." John smiled politely. "Then you have yourself a good day, ma'am." He walked away, but in his gut, he knew this wouldn't be the last time she caused trouble. For a few peaceful mornings, John thought maybe things had calmed down. Buddy, his loyal golden retriever, would trot along the fence line every sunrise, tail wagging, greeting joggers and mail carriers like an old friend. But peace doesn't last long when Karen lives next door. It started subtly. John would catch her peeking through the blinds, scribbling notes in a little notepad. At first, he ignored it until she started leaving anonymous letters in his mailbox. "Please keep your dog under control. This is a peaceful neighborhood. Your dog's barking is scaring the children. We're forming a committee to discuss the issue." Each note got nastier, even though Buddy hardly barked at all. One morning, while John was sipping his coffee, Buddy barked once, just once, after a squirrel dashed across the yard. Within 30 seconds, Karen's back door slammed open. She stormed outside in her robe, hair wild, clutching her phone. "That's it, I warned you, John. I'm reporting this." John stepped onto the porch. "Reporting what exactly?" "A squirrel. Don't you play dumb with me. This is harassment. My cat's terrified." "Your cat's on my fence every other day," John said calmly, sipping his coffee. "Buddy's just being protective." Karen gasped, clutching her pearls dramatically. "Oh, so now you're blaming my cat? Unbelievable. This is animal abuse. You think just because you're some big-shot ex-cop you can do whatever you want?" John raised an eyebrow. "I'm not an ex-cop, ma'am. I still serve. But right now, I'm just your neighbor trying to enjoy his coffee." That made her falter. For a moment, she looked unsure, then her pride took over. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I'll make sure the authorities hear about your dangerous dog." Buddy tilted his head, letting out a low, confused woof. John just smiled faintly. "Good luck with that, Karen." That afternoon, John was mowing the front lawn when he noticed something odd, Karen filming him on her phone. She was narrating like she was on a true crime show. "There he is, the man who refuses to control his animal. I have video evidence now." John shut off the mower and called out, "You know, recording people without consent like that can be considered harassment, right?" Karen scoffed. "I'm collecting proof. The neighborhood deserves safety," he sighed, shaking his head. "You really need a hobby." The next few days, things escalated. Karen told other neighbors that Buddy was violent. She spread rumors that he'd snapped at a child, even though everyone knew Buddy spent his days chasing butterflies and sleeping under the porch. But then, one fateful morning, John was preparing breakfast when he heard loud shouting from outside. He ran to the window, and there she was again, standing by his fence, throwing water from a garden hose at Buddy. "Bad dog, go away, you're scaring my cat again," she yelled. John burst out the door. "Karen, are you out of your mind?" She snapped back, "Your dog growled at me, he's dangerous." Buddy was standing 5 feet away, dripping wet, tail wagging like he thought this was a game. "Growled at you, he's wagging his tail," John said, incredulous. "I feel threatened," she shrieked, fumbling for her phone. "I'm calling the police." John stepped closer, trying to keep calm. "Karen, you're exaggerating again." "No, this time they'll believe me. I'm calling right now." And she did. Right there in front of him, she dialed 911. "Yes, this is Karen Dillard from Maple Ridge. I'm being attacked by a dangerous animal. Please hurry." Then she glanced at John, smirking triumphantly. "We'll see who's laughing when the cops show up." John folded his arms, deadpan. "You're right, Karen, we'll see." Buddy barked once, as if to say, "Oh, this is going to be fun." The next scene would change everything. Because when those sirens finally came around the corner, Karen had no idea the police chief she'd just called on was standing right in front of her. The sky had barely turned orange when Karen made the call. John stood motionless on his porch, arms folded, watching her pace back and forth like she was in the middle of a hostage situation. Buddy sat beside him, dripping wet from the hose she'd blasted him with, wagging his tail like this was all part of some strange new game. "Yes, operator." Karen's voice trembled with fake panic. "There's a dangerous animal attacking me right now. A huge golden dog, it's barking and baring its teeth at me. I'm scared for my life. John exhaled slowly through his nose. He'd dealt with people like her for years, attention seekers, manipulators, chronic exaggerators, but it was different when it was your own neighbor. "Ma'am, are you injured?" the dispatcher asked, voice calm and professional. "No, but I could be. He's going to bite me, I just know it. Please hurry." John could practically hear the dispatcher's skeptical tone through the phone. "All right, officers will be en route shortly. Please remain at a safe distance." Karen hung up, puffing her chest like she'd just done her civic duty. She turned toward John with a triumphant smirk. "They'll be here soon. Let's see how your precious mutt behaves when real law enforcement shows up." John gave her the faintest of smiles. "I'm counting on it." He waited quietly as she stood at the edge of her driveway, clutching her phone like a trophy. Buddy leaned against his leg, eyes soft, oblivious to the storm brewing. John crouched down, patting his head. "Easy, boy, you didn't do anything wrong." The low hum of sirens started to echo in the distance. Karen perked up instantly like a predator spotting prey. "Finally," she said, brushing her hair back and straightening her blouse. "About time someone dealt with this menace." John just smiled faintly, muttering, "Yeah, about time." He stepped inside the house and picked up his radio. "Dispatch, this is Chief Collins. You copy?" "Go ahead, Chief," came the reply. "I've got units headed to a 1011 at 1408 Maple Ridge. Caller claims animal aggression." There was a pause, then a small chuckle. "Wait, Chief, that's your address." John smirked. "Yep, false report most likely. I'll meet them outside, have them keep their lights on for effect." "Roger that, Chief. Guess we'll log this one under neighborhood nonsense." He clipped the radio back to his belt, took one last sip of coffee, and walked out the door, cool, calm, and ready to end this charade once and for all. The patrol cars rolled into Maple Ridge moments later, lights flashing against the neat rows of suburban houses. Neighbors peeked through blinds and whispered. A few even stepped onto their porches, curious. Karen was loving it. Her posture straightened, chin high, hands on hips. She wanted the world to see her as the hero, the brave woman who tamed the wild beast next door. The first officer stepped out, a young rookie, probably mid-20s, hand resting cautiously on his taser. His partner followed, scanning the area. Karen ran toward them. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. That dog tried to attack me. I barely escaped." The rookie blinked. Ma'am, which dog?" She pointed dramatically. "That one." Buddy sat by the porch, tongue out, tail wagging furiously, the picture of innocence. The officer frowned. "That's a golden retriever." "Yes, don't be fooled by that face. It's dangerous. It lunged at me." The partner stifled a laugh. "Ma'am, I don't think he's lunging at anything except maybe a treat." But Karen doubled down, clutching her chest. "You're not taking this seriously. That animal should be removed, arrested, something." The officers exchanged a glance. "We don't arrest dogs, ma'am." "Then cite the owner. He's reckless. He's—" And then the sound of a car door shutting behind them cut her off. All three turned. John was walking down the porch steps, his dark blue uniform crisp, badge glinting in the afternoon sun. His expression was calm, unreadable, the same one he used at crime scenes and town halls alike. Karen's confident smile wavered. "W8, what are you wearing?" John adjusted his collar casually. "Oh, just the uniform I wear every day." The rookie immediately straightened up. "Chief Collins, sir, we didn't realize this was your—" Karen's mouth fell open. "See, Chief." John nodded slowly, eyes locked on her. "That's right, Karen, I'm your police chief, the one you just called on your neighbor for, what was it again, barking." The silence that followed was deafening. Karen's face turned pale as the realization hit her. "Why, you can't be serious. You're the chief." John raised a brow. "I was serious when I told you I still serve, remember." The rookie couldn't hold it in anymore. He let out a tiny chuckle before clearing his throat and trying to look professional again. Karen stammered, This is a misunderstanding. I felt threatened." John crossed his arms. "By Buddy, the same dog who's currently lying down and wagging his tail." She looked back at Buddy, who tilted his head like he was just as confused as everyone else. "He growled at me," she blurted. John frowned. "You sure about that?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you sprayed him with water and shouted at him first." The officers nodded silently, trying to hide their smirks. John stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that only she could hear. "Karen, I've spent 2 decades dealing with real emergencies. People in danger, lives on the line. You called 911 because your neighbor's dog barked." She started to protest. But he cut her off. "You wasted department resources. You lied to dispatch about an attack. You know what that's called." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "A false report," he nodded. "Exactly, and do you know what happens when someone files a false report?" Her eyes darted between the two officers. You're not going to arrest me, are you?" John took a step back. "Not today, but I'll be filing a written warning. One more call like this and it won't be a warning next time." Karen's composure finally cracked. "I'm sorry, Chief Collins. I didn't realize. I thought maybe I just wanted the noise to stop." John's voice softened slightly. Karen, buddy isn't the problem. You can't control every little thing that bothers you. Life doesn't work like that. She lowered her gaze, muttering, I just wanted peace. He gave her a small nod. So do I, that's all any of us want. Now go home, get some rest, and stop calling the police every time you hear a bark. Karen opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. With a trembling sigh, she turned and walked back to her house. The two officers stood in silence for a moment before the rookie finally said, Well, Chief, that's one for the books. John chuckled. Yeah, add it to the list. They all laughed quietly as Karen's door shut behind her. Buddy padded over, leaning into John's leg as if to say, Good job, boss. John scratched behind his ears. Good boy, Buddy, you just survived your first criminal accusation. Later that night, as John sat on the porch watching the sunset, his phone buzzed with a message from dispatch. Dispatch log, false animal report resolved by Chief Collins. Notes, suspect's name, Karen Dillard. He smirked and replied, Case closed, dog exonerated. Buddy barked once in approval. The morning after the chaotic dog incident, word spread quickly around Maple Ridge. Neighbors whispered about what happened, how Karen had called the cops, only to find out the dangerous dog owner was the police chief himself. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no, humiliation only made her more determined. That evening, John sat on his porch with Buddy at his feet. The sunset painted the sky orange and gold. For once, the air felt calm again. But as he sipped his sweet tea, he noticed Karen pacing on her porch, phone pressed to her ear. He couldn't hear everything, but phrases drifted across the yard. Abuse of power, intimidation, animal control complaint, I know my rights, John sighed. Here we go again, Bud. Buddy tilted his head and gave a little groan, as if agreeing. The knock at the door the next morning, there was a hard knock at John's door. He opened it to find two animal control officers standing there, clipboards in hand. Morning, Chief, one said awkwardly. We, got a call. John nodded slowly. Let me guess, Karen? They both exchanged glances. Yeah, she filed a formal report, said your dog's aggressive and a threat to the community. Buddy appeared behind John, tail wagging, holding a tennis ball in his mouth. The officers tried not to laugh. He, doesn't look too dangerous. John smiled faintly. He's a menace if you're a tennis ball. Still, rules were rules. John led them to the backyard, where Buddy happily showed off his collection of toys and promptly sat down on command. The officers did their inspection, took some photos, and shook their heads. Everything looks fine here, Chief. We'll file it as unfounded. Appreciate it, John said. And fellas, try not to be too hard on her. She's passionate. They chuckled. That's one word for it. The confrontation, but Karen wasn't amused when she saw the animal control truck leaving John's driveway. She stormed across the street, still in her house slippers, waving a piece of paper. You think you can intimidate city officials into taking your side? John put down his rake and looked up. Morning, Karen. How's your cat? Don't you dare deflect. I know what you're doing, using your badge to bully me. John kept his tone calm. Karen, they came here, did their job, and saw the truth. Buddy's not dangerous. You're lying, she shouted. You have everyone fooled because you wear that uniform, but I'm not scared of you. Her voice cracked slightly, whether from anger or embarrassment, even she didn't know. John stepped closer, soft but firm. Karen, I don't need to intimidate anyone. The truth speaks for itself. You're the one crossing lines, spraying my dog, calling 911 for no reason, spreading lies. That's harassment. Ha, you think you can accuse me of harassment? I'm documenting everything, Chief. Every word, every noise, every bark. She pointed her phone camera at him again. John sighed. Then make sure you get this part. I'm asking you one last time to stop. But Karen's glare only hardened. You'll regret this. You can't hide behind your badge forever. She spun around and stomped back to her house, muttering to herself. The HOA meeting later that week, John attended a neighborhood safety meeting, not as the police chief, but as a resident. He wanted to show transparency, to keep peace in the community. The meeting was in the local recreation hall. Folding chairs, bad coffee, and a projector that never quite worked right. But as soon as John walked in, all eyes turned to him, and then to Karen, sitting in the front row with her arms crossed, glaring like a viper ready to strike. The HOA president, an older gentleman named Rick, cleared his throat. All right, folks, before we begin, we need to address a few recent misunderstandings. Karen shot her hand up. I have something to say, Rick sighed. Go ahead, Karen. She stood, holding a thick folder. This man, she said, pointing dramatically at John, has been harassing me and endangering our neighborhood with his vicious animal. He's also using his position of authority to silence my complaints. A murmur went through the room. Some neighbors rolled their eyes, others looked uncomfortable. John stayed seated, calm, hands folded. Rick frowned. Karen, we've already discussed this. No, she interrupted. I won't be silenced. Can't live under the rule of someone who abuses power. Finally, John stood. His voice was calm but carried weight. Karen, with all due respect, I've done nothing but try to keep peace. I've responded with patience, not power. You filed multiple false reports, harassed my property, and endangered my dog. He looked around the room. And I didn't pull rank. I handled it like a neighbor because I believe in community, not control. The room fell silent. Even Karen's breathing seemed to catch. Rick cleared his throat. Chief, we appreciate your professionalism, and Karen. Unless you have actual evidence, I think it's time to move on. But Karen wasn't done. She snatched her phone again, hitting play on a video. I do have evidence. Look, he's intimidating me. The shaky footage showed John talking calmly on his porch. Karen's voice was screeching from behind the camera, and Buddy was wagging his tail in the corner. The neighbors burst into quiet laughter. Rick pinched the bridge of his nose. Karen, please sit down. Her face went red. You're all blind. He's manipulating you? John gave a small, tired smile. I think we're done here. He turned to leave, and that's when Karen made her biggest mistake yet. The threat as John stepped out the door, Karen hissed loud enough for everyone to hear. You'll see what happens when people stop protecting you. He froze, slowly turned. The entire room went silent. Rick stood up immediately. Karen, that's enough. But the damage was done. Her words weren't just angry, they were threatening. John didn't respond. He just gave her a long, disappointed look. Be careful, Karen, words have consequences. Then he left. That night as he sat on his porch, the crickets chirped in the darkness. Buddy lay beside him, head on John's boot, eyes half closed. John's phone buzzed, a message from one of the officers. Chief, FYI, Karen called the mayor's office, said you're unfit for duty. Guess she's escalating. John sighed. Let her file what she wants. The truth always comes out. He glanced at Buddy. Right, boy. Buddy wagged his tail once and gave a soft bark. But deep down, John knew this wasn't over. Because when someone like Karen feels cornered, they do something reckless. And the next morning, she did exactly that. The morning after the HOA meeting, the neighborhood was buzzing. People whispered in driveways, texted in group chats, and shared knowing glances when they passed by Karen's house. Everyone had seen her meltdown. Everyone had heard her threat. And while John hoped that humiliation might finally make her back off, he should have known better. Karen wasn't the type to retreat, she was the type to strike back. The false complaint John arrived at the police station early the next day, coffee in hand. He was reviewing reports in his office when his secretary buzzed in. Chief, there's a woman here to file a formal complaint, says it's urgent. John sighed, setting down his pen. What's her name? A pause. Karen Dillard. John leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. Of course it is. He nodded for her to send Karen in. A moment later, the office door swung open and Karen marched in, clutching a stack of papers. Her hair was perfectly styled, her lipstick bright red, the look of someone who'd spent hours preparing for battle. Chief, she began coldly. I'm here in my official capacity as a resident of Maple Ridge to report animal neglect, officer misconduct, and abuse of authority. John gestured to the chair across from him. Please have a seat. I'll stand, she snapped. All right, what exactly are you accusing me of, Mrs. Dillard? She slammed the papers onto his desk. Everything. I have photos of your dog off-leash, videos of you raising your voice at me, and proof that you've been using your position to intimidate me. John picked up the papers, flipping through them slowly. Most were blurry cell phone pictures, Buddy running across the yard, John talking to a mailman, Karen's cat on the fence. He looked up. Karen, these aren't evidence of anything illegal. You would say that, she sneered. Because you think you're untouchable? John's tone stayed calm, but his patience was wearing thin. Mrs. Dillard, you've filed multiple false complaints. You've called emergency services for non-emergencies. You've harassed me and my dog repeatedly. If this continues, you could be facing charges yourself. Karen's jaw dropped. Charges? Are you threatening me? I'm explaining the law, John said evenly. And if you truly believe you have a case, I recommend you take it to internal affairs. Her expression shifted, a glimmer of satisfaction. Oh, don't worry, I already did. That caught John off guard. Excuse me. I called the mayor's office, the county oversight board, and the press. By now they all know what kind of man you are. She leaned forward with a smirk. Your badge won't protect you forever. John held her gaze, calm as ever. Karen, you can twist the story all you want, but eventually the truth catches up, always does. Karen scoffed, grabbed her papers, and stormed out. As she passed the front desk, officers tried not to laugh. One muttered under his breath, Man, Chief, that lady's got more drama than daytime TV. John just sighed. She's not done yet, and that's what worries me. The damage begins by the next morning. Things got worse. Local gossip blogs and a small-town news site ran an article. Police chief accused of abusing power in neighborhood dispute, the source. A concerned resident from Maple Ridge. The story exaggerated everything, claimed John's dog attacked children, that John threatened Karen, that the police department was covering it up. It was nonsense, but it spread fast. At the station, a few younger officers looked uneasy. "Chief, people are posting about it online," one said. "Even the town Facebook group's going wild." John just nodded. "Let them talk, we'll stay professional." But that night when he came home, something felt wrong. The porch light flickered, the gate was open, and Buddy wasn't waiting by the door like he always did. "Buddy," John called, voice tense. "Buddy, come here, boy." No sound. He ran around the yard and found Buddy sitting by the fence, shaking. The gate latch had been broken, and there was a handwritten note pinned to it. "Dangerous dogs don't belong in good neighborhoods. Consider this a warning." John's stomach dropped. His calm exterior finally cracked. He picked up the note, crumpled it in his hand, and whispered, "That's it." He went inside, grabbed his phone, and called the sheriff's investigative unit. "I need a report filed," he said, voice cold. "Trespassing, property damage, possible animal endangerment. I've got a suspect." The investigation within an hour, 2 deputies arrived to take statements. They photographed the broken latch, the note, and Buddy's paw prints. John explained the history, the harassment, the 911 calls, the fake reports. One deputy, Officer Hill, frowned. "Chief, honestly, this is serious. If we can connect this to her, it's criminal harassment at minimum, possibly intimidation of a public official." John nodded grimly. "I don't want special treatment. Handle it by the book." The next day, deputies visited Corinne's house. According to the report, she opened the door pretending to be shocked. "Someone vandalized his property? That's awful." But her nervous smile and trembling hands told a different story. When asked if she'd written the note, she denied it, then immediately said, "You can't prove anything," before they even mentioned handwriting. They left her with a warning, but John knew she wouldn't stop. The setup a few days later, while John was at the station, Corinne pulled one more desperate stunt. She stood on the sidewalk with her phone out, filming Buddy through the fence. "There he is again, loose and dangerous," she narrated loudly. Buddy was lying down, half asleep. When one of John's neighbors, Mrs. Ramirez, walked by, she frowned. "Corinne, what are you doing? The dog's literally napping." "He growled at me," Corinne barked back. Mrs. Ramirez shook her head. "You're hearing things again." But Corinne wasn't listening. She uploaded the footage to social media that night, cropped, edited, and captioned. "Police chief's dog terrorizes neighborhood, town in fear." That was the final straw. The next morning, John filed an official restraining order against Corinne for harassment, false reporting, and defamation. And this time, when the officers arrived to serve the papers, they didn't knock politely. They came with bodycams on and citations in hand. Corinne stood on her porch, arms crossed, pretending to be unfazed, but when she saw John standing behind the patrol car, watching silently, her face went pale. "What is this?" she demanded. Officer Hill handed her the papers. "Ma'am, you're being served a restraining order by Chief Harris. You're to cease all contact, in person or otherwise, immediately." Corinne's voice cracked. "You can't do this to me. I'm the victim here." Hill kept his tone professional. "Ma'am, you've been warned multiple times. Continuing this behavior will result in criminal charges." John didn't say a word. He just looked her in the eyes, calm and steady. Finally, Corinne broke the silence, trembling with anger. "You'll regret this. I'll take this to the state level." John finally spoke. "Then take it wherever you want, Corinne. The law applies to everyone, even you." He turned and walked back to his car, Buddy's head poking out the passenger window, and for the first time, Corinne didn't shout back. She just stood there, shaking, realizing she'd finally picked the wrong fight. But even as the sun set that evening, John couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Corinne was cornered, and cornered people make rash decisions. The next chapter of this feud would take things from petty harassment to real legal consequences, and once again the police would be called, only this time for Corinne herself. For a few days, things were eerily quiet in Maple Ridge. Corinne's porch light stayed off. Her blinds were drawn. The once constant shriek of her voice had faded into silence. John almost allowed himself to believe it was finally over. He spent those days doing what he loved, mowing the pasture, tossing a ball for Buddy, enjoying the sound of peace that had been missing for weeks. But on the 4th evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, that peace shattered. John heard the sound of tires screeching on gravel. He turned and saw a black SUV speeding down the lane, and it wasn't one of his deputies. The vehicle came to a stop right in front of his fence, and out stepped Corinne. Her hair was messy, makeup smeared, eyes wild with rage. She was holding something, a folder and a phone, waving both like weapons. "You think you can silence me with a piece of paper?" she yelled from the road. "You think you can ruin my reputation?" John stayed calm. "Corinne, you're violating the restraining order. Step back." "Oh, I'm way past that," she screamed. "You're corrupt and I have proof. You won't get away with this." Buddy started barking, sensing the tension. John sighed, reached for his phone, and called dispatch. "It's Chief Harris. I need units to my address. Violator of an active restraining order. Advise code 2. Corinne laughed, a high-pitched, frantic sound. "Calling your little friends again? You can't hide behind your badge forever." She threw the folder on the ground, papers scattered in the wind. They were just copies of her old complaints, none of them valid. John took a slow step forward. Karen, put your phone down, go home, and don't make this worse. But she didn't listen. She stormed closer, waving the phone in his face. I'm filming this. Everyone will see how the chief treats innocent citizens. John stayed composed, his voice steady. Karen, stop approaching me. This is your final warning. Or what? You'll arrest me. Go ahead. Let's see how your little officers like turning on their boss. At that moment, headlights appeared at the end of the street, 2 patrol cars rolling in slowly, lights flashing blue and red against the dusk. Karen froze for a second, realizing they weren't coming to help her. They were coming for her. The standoff, the first car stopped a few yards away. Officer Hill and Deputy Carter stepped out carefully, hands visible, body cams recording. Ma'am, Hill called, you're in violation of a court order. Please step back from the property and place your phone on the ground. Karen's voice shook. No, you're all corrupt. You're helping him. He's the reason my life's ruined. Carter took a cautious step closer. Ma'am, you need to comply or we'll be forced to detain you. Please, don't you touch me, she shrieked. I'm not going anywhere. I have rights. She backed up into the road, waving her arms wildly, nearly tripping over her own feet. John stood still, watching. His heart was heavy, not angry anymore, just tired. He said quietly, Hill, de-escalate her, carefully. Hill nodded. Ma'am, nobody wants this to go bad, but you're trespassing and ignoring lawful orders. You need to calm down. Karen pointed straight at John. He's manipulating you all. He's dangerous. Look at him standing there with that smug look like he's above the law. John met her eyes and said softly, Karen, I don't want you in handcuffs, but you've left us no choice. You can't arrest me, she screamed, tears welling up. I'm the victim. He's the monster here. Buddy barked once, loud and sharp, almost like he was answering her. Karen turned on the dog. And you filthy mutt. She took a step toward the fence, raising her hand, and that was it. Hill moved in fast, grabbing her arm. That's enough, ma'am. You're under arrest for violation of a restraining order, harassment, and disorderly conduct. Karen struggled, screaming, Get off me. You're all going to regret this. I'll sue you. I'll sue everyone. Carter helped secure her wrists with cuffs as she kicked and shouted. The body cams caught every second, every word, every threat. John stood still, silent, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. When Hill guided Karen toward the patrol car, she twisted around, glaring at John through tear-streaked cheeks. You ruined me. You'll pay for this. Everyone will know what you did. John stepped forward just slightly. Karen, what I did was nothing. What ruined you was your own hate. That hit harder than any punishment could. Her face crumpled, and for the first time she didn't yell. She just whispered, This isn't over, before the door slammed shut. The aftermath, when the patrol cars pulled away, the neighborhood slowly came alive again. Porch lights flicked on, curtains moved, people peeked out whispering. Mrs. Ramirez from down the street approached quietly. Chief, did they finally take her? John nodded. Yeah. She's going to spend the night in county holding. The old woman shook her head. About time. That woman's been terrorizing this block for months. You did the right thing. John gave a tired smile. I just wish it didn't have to end like this. Buddy wagged his tail, pressing against his leg. Mrs. Ramirez chuckled. That dog's got more patience than most people. John laughed softly. He really does. The quiet night that night, for the first time in weeks, the air was calm again. No shouting, no cameras, no notes. John sat on the porch with Buddy beside him, listening to the crickets and watching the stars come out. He thought about how something as small as a barking dog had spiraled into this storm, and how pride and anger could twist people until they couldn't see straight. He didn't hate Karen. He pitied her. Because deep down, she wasn't evil, just bitter, lonely, and desperate to control something in a world she couldn't. As he sipped his coffee, he whispered to Buddy, You know, boy, people can lose themselves over the smallest things. Buddy rested his head on John's boot and gave a low, content sigh. Then John's phone buzzed a message from Hill. Chief, she's calm now. We processed her without issue. She asked for her cat to be taken care of. We found it safe at her house. Thought you'd want to know. John replied simply, Thanks, Hill. Make sure she gets mental health support. She needs help, not hate. Set the phone down, took a deep breath, and looked at the quiet street. For the first time in months, peace had returned. But as the stars shimmered above the quiet neighborhood, one thing was certain. This wasn't just a story about a barking dog or a bitter neighbor. It was about pride, power, and what happens when someone finally meets the consequences of their own choices. And for Karen, those consequences had only just begun the morning of the court hearing. Maple Ridge buzzed with quiet anticipation. Neighbors whispered in their cars as they parked, some craning to catch a glimpse of Karen entering the courthouse. Inside, the room smelled of polished wood and recycled air. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, highlighting the nervous energy in the room. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table, clutching her folder as if it were a shield. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, mascara slightly smeared from restless nights. Every so often, she glanced toward John, who was seated calmly in the witness section with Buddy by his side. The dog lay quietly at John's feet, an almost ironic contrast to the storm Karen had created. The judge, a stern but fair woman named Judge Larkin, entered and everyone stood. "You may be seated," she instructed. The bailiff called the case. Maple Ridge v. Karen Dillard, case number 30 for 82-2025. Mrs. Dillard, you are here regarding multiple counts of harassment, false reporting, and violation of a restraining order. Karen stiffened. Her lawyer, a harried young man who looked unsure about taking this case, whispered to her, "Just calm down, we'll get through this." "Calm down," she hissed under her breath. "This man's ruined me." Judge Larkin cleared her throat. "Mrs. Dillard, this is a courtroom. Accusations without evidence carry no weight here. You may present your case, but I advise you to proceed truthfully and respectfully." Karen shot a glare at John. "Truthful? He's the truth. Lies, lies, I have evidence." John raised his hand slightly in greeting but said nothing. Calm, collected. The weight of authority on him was quiet but undeniable. Karen's accusations, Karen's lawyer stood and began to speak. "Your Honor, my client has been subjected to intimidation, harassment, and dangerous behavior by the defendant's dog. We contend that Chief Harris has abused his authority to cover up these incidents." He gestured toward John. "The plaintiff's repeated calls to law enforcement were ignored or dismissed. My client deserves justice and protection." The judge nodded, listening patiently. "Proceed with evidence." Karen's lawyer handed over the folder. Karen eagerly leaned forward. "Look, proof," she demanded. "These photos, these videos, he's been threatening me. His dog's aggressive. He's. John calmly raised his hand. "Your Honor, may I respond?" Judge Larkin nodded. "You may, Chief Harris." John's calm defense. John stood, hands behind his back, exuding a quiet authority. "Your Honor, these claims are entirely unfounded. The so-called evidence consists of blurry photos, edited videos, and exaggerated accounts. Buddy, my dog, is trained, friendly, and has never harmed anyone. More importantly, Mrs. Dillard's actions escalated this situation. She filed multiple false reports, harassed me at my home, and violated the restraining order that had been put in place to protect both parties." He paused, scanning the courtroom. "This isn't about a dog. It's about responsibility, accountability, and the consequences of ignoring the truth." Karen's jaw tightened. She leaned forward to interrupt, but the judge raised a hand. "One moment, Mrs. Dillard. The defendant make." John continued, voice calm but firm. "I have spent my career protecting people, upholding the law, and ensuring safety. Yet when personal pride and anger take over, they can blind judgment. Mrs. Dillard's behavior has put herself and others at risk, calling emergency services without cause, posting false allegations online, and trespassing on private property. The evidence will show a pattern of harassment, not the isolated incidents she claims." The judge's questions. Judge Larkin leaned forward. "Mrs. Dillard, did you enter Chief Harris's property after being told not to?" Karen's voice quivered. I had to show proof. He won't listen." "And did you call 911 multiple times about alleged attacks by his dog?" Karen swallowed. Maybe, I just wanted someone to see what was happening." "Mrs. Dillard, you were served with a restraining order. Do you understand that you were legally prohibited from contacting or approaching Chief Harris?" Karen lowered her eyes. I thought I could. I just wanted to." Judge Larkin's voice softened slightly but remained firm. "Mrs. Dillard, repeated violations of law have consequences. Today we are determining accountability, not intention. The court will review all evidence, including eyewitness accounts, bodycam footage, and official reports." The evidence revealed the bailiff brought forward a laptop and played the bodycam footage from the night of the restraining order violation. Karen's frantic shouting, the broken gate, and her threatening gestures were all captured clearly. The sound of Buddy barking once in response made her appear even more unreasonable. Gasps echoed softly through the courtroom. Judge Larkin looked at Karen directly. "Mrs. Dillard, do you recognize yourself in this footage?" Karen's face flushed crimson. She nodded slowly, voice shaking. "Yes, that's me." John sat quietly, letting the footage speak for itself. Buddy rested his head on his paws, calm as ever. The prosecutor handed over the animal control reports showing repeated false complaints and threats. Witness statements from neighbors confirmed the harassment and escalating behavior. Karen's lawyer stammered, unable to provide any counter-evidence. The emotional breakdown. Karen's shoulders slumped. The fire and fury that had driven her for weeks finally cracked. I didn't mean to," she whispered. Judge Larkin's tone softened but stayed firm. "Intent does not excuse repeated violations. You have endangered both yourself and your neighbor. This court must uphold the law." Karen buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. I just wanted him to leave me alone, I thought." John remained seated, emotionless outwardly, but a small flicker of pity crossed his eyes. He knew she had acted out of fear and pride, not true malice. The verdict after reviewing all evidence, Judge Larkin spoke. Based on the testimony, body cam footage, official reports, and verified witness accounts, the court finds Mrs. Karen Dillard guilty of harassment, violation of a restraining order, and filing false reports. She is hereby ordered to cease all contact with John Harris and his property immediately. Complete mandatory anger management and community service. Refrain from filing further false complaints against John Harris. Failure to comply will result in criminal charges and potential jail time. Karen's shoulders sagged. The courtroom felt heavy with silence. I understand, she muttered. John finally stood, speaking softly, almost as a lesson, not a victory. Karen, the law exists to protect everyone. You crossed the line, and today the law held up. Learn from this, take responsibility, and maybe find peace. Buddy barked once, quietly, as if agreeing. Karen's face fell. She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. The fire that had driven her for weeks was gone, replaced by the stark realization of the consequences of her own choices. The aftermath as the courtroom emptied, neighbors whispered among themselves, some clapping quietly for John's patience and professionalism. Karen was escorted to the courthouse exit by officers for processing her community service and mandatory sessions. She didn't resist anymore, the fight had left her. Outside, John knelt to pet Buddy. Well, boy, looks like peace is finally back. Buddy wagged his tail, resting his head against John's knee. John took a deep breath, looking at the streets of Maple Ridge. He knew life wouldn't always be calm, but for now, justice had been served, and sometimes that was enough. A week after the courtroom verdict, Maple Ridge finally seemed calm. Neighbors walked their dogs without worry, kids played freely in yards, and Buddy lounged contentedly on John's porch. The balance of peace that had been absent for weeks was slowly returning, but Karen wasn't ready to accept defeat. She spent the next few days plotting quietly, lurking around town and talking to anyone who would listen. Her social media posts were subtle at first, hints of injustice, cries about abuse of power, and manipulative tales of victimhood. Then came her big idea, a neighborhood-wide HOA protest aimed at embarrassing John in front of the entire community. She planned to frame it as a public safety concern, insisting Buddy was still dangerous and that John had used his badge to intimidate residents. The setup on the morning of the protest, Karen appeared in her signature power outfit, crisp blazer, bright lipstick, hair perfectly styled. She had a megaphone, flyers, and a small entourage of neighbors she had convinced were worried citizens. John, meanwhile, was enjoying his usual morning routine, mowing the lawn while Buddy chased a frisbee. Karen stepped onto the street with her group and began yelling through the megaphone. Residents of Maple Ridge, your safety is in danger. Chief Harris is hiding the truth from you. His dog is a menace. He's abusing his position of power. Neighbors peeked from their windows. Some shook their heads. Some came outside, curious to see the spectacle. John paused his mowing and slowly walked toward the crowd, Buddy trotting beside him. His uniform was pressed, badge gleaming, and his posture calm, the calm before a storm. Karen spotted him and shrieked, "There he is, the man who's endangered us all." John stopped a few feet away, voice calm. "Karen, you are violating your restraining order again. Step back and end this now." "Never," she screamed. "Everyone here will see the truth." Megaphone crackled as she tried to rally her small group of supporters, but even they were starting to look uneasy. The confrontation, John raised a hand toward the crowd. "Neighbors, please listen. This isn't about me or my dog. This is about law, truth, and safety. Karen Dillard has a restraining order and has been warned repeatedly. She is harassing me and spreading false information." A few neighbors whispered among themselves. "Wait, she does have a restraining order?" one asked. "Yeah," another replied. "Remember the courthouse thing?" Karen's face contorted with rage. She waved the megaphone, almost trembling. "You're all blinded. He's lying to you. His dog attacked me, and he's using the law to silence me." Buddy barked once, loud and sharp, as if punctuating the absurdity of her claims. John stepped closer, maintaining a safe distance. "Karen, I'm giving you one final warning. Step back now, or law enforcement will intervene." Her supporters began to look uncomfortable. One muttered under his breath, "Maybe we shouldn't be here." Karen whipped around, glaring at them. "No, you stay. You have to help expose him." But it was too late. Her plan was unraveling. Police arrival within minutes. John's team of officers arrived, quietly but efficiently. Their presence was commanding, their body cams rolling, ready to capture the scene. Karen's eyes widened. "No, you can't do this. I'm protesting my rights." John raised a hand. "Karen, you are violating the restraining order again. Leave immediately. Failure to comply will result in arrest." "You're all conspiring against me. This is harassment," she screamed. One of her supposed supporters stepped back, clearly reconsidering their participation. Another whispered, "Maybe we should just go home." The officers moved closer. "Mrs. Dillard, step away from Chief Harris. This is your final warning," Officer Hill called. Karen stomped her foot and raised the megaphone again, yelling incoherently. But the crowd, once enthusiastic, had dispersed. Neighbors were retreating into their homes, cameras now turned toward Karen's chaotic behavior rather than her message. The arrest John didn't move toward her. He didn't have to. He knew the law was on his side and the evidence of repeated violations was indisputable. "Karen," he said quietly but firmly, "enough." She whirled toward him, screaming, waving the megaphone. "I will not be silenced. Arrest him instead." That was the final mistake. Officer Hill stepped forward, gently but decisively. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for violation of a restraining order, harassment, and disorderly conduct." Karen screamed and struggled, but the officers were prepared. They quickly cuffed her while she shouted at the crowd, which by now had mostly gone silent. "You'll regret this. Everyone will see what you did," she yelled, tears streaming down her face. John stepped closer, crouching slightly to speak calmly. "Karen, the truth is already clear. You've pushed boundaries, ignored the law, and endangered yourself. This is your last chance to take responsibility and seek help." She froze for a brief moment, realizing her grand finale had failed spectacularly. The officers led her toward the patrol car. Her megaphone was confiscated, her flyers scattered on the street. Neighbors peeked cautiously, some nodding to John in quiet respect. Buddy barked once and ran back to John's side. The neighborhood reacts after Karen was taken away. Maple Ridge slowly returned to normal. Mrs. Ramirez came over with a plate of cookies. "John, I can't believe she actually tried that." John smiled faintly, patting Buddy. "It wasn't worth the energy worrying about it. The law handled the rest." Other neighbors waved, some joking quietly. "Well, that's one way to calm down a neighborhood." John chuckled. "Buddy agrees." Buddy barked happily. Even the local news briefly covered the incident, but this time it highlighted the law enforcement's professionalism, not Karen's exaggerated claims. Reflection that night, John sat on his porch with Buddy at his feet looking at the quiet street. "You know, boy, some people just can't handle responsibility. Pride makes them blind. Anger makes them reckless." Buddy wagged his tail softly, resting his head against John's leg. John leaned back, eyes scanning the now peaceful neighborhood. He knew life wouldn't always be calm, but he had learned something crucial. Sometimes patience, calm authority, and the law itself were more powerful than yelling, protests, or megaphones. He whispered to Buddy, "And sometimes peace isn't just about keeping your yard quiet. It's about making sure the world sees the truth." For the first time in months, John felt a sense of genuine relief. The chaos that Karen had brought into their lives had been fully contained. And for Karen, well, her final stunt had backfired spectacularly, leaving her humiliated, exhausted, and finally forced to face the consequences of her actions. The neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. Maple Ridge was safe again. The following morning, Maple Ridge felt lighter. The tension that had gripped the neighborhood for weeks had lifted, replaced by calm streets, wagging dogs, and neighbors cautiously greeting one another. John stepped onto his porch with Buddy at his side. The dog's tail wagged lazily, a ball of contentment at his feet. John sipped his coffee and listened to the quiet hum of the early morning. For once, he felt the weight of the past few weeks begin to ease. The courthouse had finalized Karen's consequences. She would attend mandatory counseling, complete community service, and remain under strict legal supervision. The restraining order had been enforced rigorously, and she was prohibited from contacting John or his property. For John, it wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability and closure. Neighborhood recovery word spread quickly that Karen's final protest had ended in her arrest. Neighbors cautiously stepped back outside, reopening their yards and allowing children and pets to play freely again. Mrs. Ramirez came over, this time with a basket of muffins and a bright smile. "John, it feels normal again," John chuckled. "It is. Buddy and I are just enjoying it." Other neighbors stopped by to wave or say hello. Some apologized for being caught up in Karen's drama. Others simply thanked John for his patience and professionalism. "It's amazing how calm you stayed through all of this," Mrs. Ramirez said. John shrugged. "It wasn't about being calm. It was about letting the truth come out. The law has a way of speaking louder than anger." Buddy barked once, as if agreeing. Karen's reflection. Meanwhile, Karen sat in a small, quiet room at the community center for her first counseling session. Her pride had been shattered, her energy drained. For weeks, she had fought, yelled, and manipulated, only to realize she had isolated herself. The counselor spoke gently. "Karen, sometimes we act out of fear or a need for control. Acknowledging that is the first step toward real change." Karen stared at the floor, silence stretching between them. For the first time, she admitted to herself that she had pushed too far, lost perspective, and brought chaos not just into John's life, but into her own. It was a small beginning, but it was a start. The court's final word at the last court check-in, Judge Larkin addressed Karen one final time. "Mrs. Dillard, your actions have consequences, but the law is also about giving people the opportunity to learn and change. I hope you take this seriously and find a way to move forward without causing harm to others." Karen nodded silently. No protest, no shouting, just quiet acknowledgement. John, watching from a distance, felt a sense of relief. Justice had been served without unnecessary escalation. He didn't feel triumph, only a calm satisfaction that the law had protected the innocent and corrected the wrongs. Returning to normal back in Maple Ridge, John and Buddy returned to their routine. Morning walks, yard work, tossing balls in the field, and quiet evenings on the porch became the rhythm of life once more. Neighbors slowly returned to their usual routines, sharing small smiles and friendly waves. The drama of the past weeks became a story they would tell with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "Remember Karen and the dog?" John sometimes chuckled when he thought about it. The situation could have spiraled out of control, but patience, law, and truth had kept it contained. Reflection on lessons learned. John sat on the porch one evening, Buddy curled at his feet, watching the sun set behind the trees. "You know, boy, people sometimes let anger and pride blind them. They try to control others instead of themselves. Karen, she learned it the hard way." Buddy barked softly, as if affirming John's words. John continued, "The law isn't about punishment. It's about accountability, fairness, and giving people a chance to do better. And sometimes that chance comes only after they've faced the consequences of their own actions." He leaned back, sipping his coffee, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders. Peace, he realized, was more than just quiet streets. It was knowing that truth and justice had prevailed without compromising who he was. A neighborly gesture. The next weekend, neighbors organized a small block gathering, a simple barbecue to celebrate the return of normalcy. John and Buddy were invited, and a few hesitant neighbors stopped by to offer apologies and thanks. Mrs. Ramirez approached him with a plate of cookies. "Chief, you handled everything with more patience than I could have imagined. Thank you." John smiled, ruffling Buddy's ears. "It wasn't about me. It was about letting the truth and the law guide the outcome. That's all anyone can do." Neighbors laughed, kids played with Buddy, and the air was filled with the simple joy of a community restored. Final thoughts that night. As John and Buddy sat on the porch under a sky full of stars, the world felt quiet and safe once more. The chaos, shouting, and fear had passed. Karen had been held accountable, the law had been upheld, and Maple Ridge was finally at peace. John whispered to Buddy, "Sometimes, boy, the right thing doesn't mean the easy thing. And sometimes, the hardest battles are with people who refuse to see the truth. But patience, fairness, and truth, they always win in the end." Buddy wagged his tail and gave a soft bark, resting his head on John's knee. And in that moment, the neighborhood, the dog, and its owner knew that justice, calm, measured, and unwavering, had finally prevailed. The story closes with a restored peace, lessons learned, and justice served, leaving a satisfying, cinematic, and emotionally resonant ending for viewers.